Welcome to the Leaner, Stronger, and Confident as Fuck podcast. Now, tell me, have you ever started the year feeling so motivated, so committed, going all in on your health and fitness goals, only to end up feeling stuck, frustrated, or a little bit exhausted and burnt out by the time February rolls around? If so, you are not alone. I have done this so many times myself. And it's not because you lack discipline or willpower or because something is wrong with you. It's simply because you have instead started with the wrong strategy. So in this episode, I'm going to break down the 5 biggest reasons that most people's health and fitness goals stall early in the year and how to avoid these traps so that this year actually becomes different. And this is going to help you shift from short-term thinking to long-term transformation so that you can finally stop starting over and build results that last. So let's dive in. So the first thing that so many people do when they start a health and fitness goal in January is to start by going too extreme. There is this urgency of just like, I need to change fast. I need to get this result now. And I totally understand wanting results quickly. Who doesn't want results faster? But the problem is that energy can lead us to going to extremes that make it very easy to fizzle out very quickly. So we tend to slash calories. We drop down to 1,200 calories because MyFitnessPal tells every woman, I think, that 1,200 calories is their fat loss goal. And breaking news, it is not. We tend to then ramp up cardio. We add loads of rules. Maybe we have sworn off chocolate, or we're like, right, I'm swearing off alcohol. I am going to never look at a donut again. I'm having no carbs. We put all of these food rules and high expectations on us. And it feels productive. And at the beginning, we probably feel pretty good on it because we are super motivated. And anyone can stick to something like that for a little bit if we have the right intention off the beginning. But at some point, if we go to extreme too hard off the gate, we will find that our energy will start to tank. And our hunger will start to ramp up. We end up feeling more fatigued as we go through. And the result of being on low calories for the beginning part of that phase is that it will all start to compound. And what might have kind of felt like manageable hunger at the beginning can really start to become so loud that it becomes very hard to ignore. And this is not to say that you can never do a more aggressive approach, but we don't want to jump into it with no plan, with not looking after some foundations such as making sure we're getting enough protein, strength training. And to be honest, for most people, it's just not necessary to go that aggressive, as well as the fact that it tends to end up backfiring. And so instead of just slashing calories or jumping on a juice cleanse or deciding that we're going to cut out entire food groups, all we need to focus on doing is creating a 20 to 30% deficit from our maintenance and focusing on getting mostly whole foods, getting at least 25 grams of fiber a day, hitting a protein target that is going to be individual for each of us, but to give you some rough guidelines, 1.8 to 2.2 grams of protein per kilo of your body weight as a rough guide. If you hit those foundations by doing 20 to 30% deficit from your maintenance, with that amount of protein, with that amount of fiber, mostly whole foods, but some room for fun foods that are well thought out, then there is no need to go to an extreme end of the category for a fat loss phase. You can get great results by really just focusing on nailing those foundations, combined with getting enough walking throughout the day so you have a steps count and making sure you are lifting weights. That is crucial if you're going through a fat loss phase because we want to hold onto our muscle mass in the process. It really doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. And if you go down that more strategic route of actually setting up a fat loss phase properly, then you will find that you will be able to last much longer than just 1 month. And you'll actually be able to get results that compound, which then will help your motivation continue past that first month too. And so we want to start thinking of the long game, but that doesn't mean that results are going to take forever as well. So make sure that you can actually commit to whatever process that you're going to do for at least 8 to 12 weeks. And depending on the results that you're looking for, if you're specifically focused on fat loss, making sure that if you want to lose perhaps more weight than you might be able to in 8 to 12 weeks, that it's something that you can actually commit to for perhaps 16 weeks. And so what we want to be thinking about doing as well is losing about 0.5 to 1% of our body weight every single week. And if you go a slightly higher percentage of a deficit, then looking towards that 1%. But if you're going at around that 20% of a deficit, thinking more around that 0.5% of your body weight. And so what I do with all my clients is I map out a timeline for them based on the goal that they have. And I show them how long it would actually take for them to reach the goal that they have in one fat loss phase approach. And then in doing so, you can make a proper plan for it. So many people just start with these random rules and think, I'm just going to white knuckle it through until I get my goal. And that inevitably fails because we don't have an end date in sight. And so having a clear start and end date for your goal, especially if fat loss is the key, making sure that you have a proper plan for it based on foundations instead of just like, oh, I just want to get this result as fast as possible, is actually how you stay in the game long enough to be able to get the result. So second up, so many people confuse doing more with doing what actually works for the transformation that they want. So at the beginning of January, especially when motivation is high, we just kind of throw more workouts at it. You know, okay, so if I'm doing this amount of group fitness classes, if I go twice a day, or if I go, I'm doing 4 classes a week, I'm going to go 6 classes a week, or I'm going running, I'm just going to run further. And more does not equal better results without a plan and without it being thought through. And so, in fact, the majority of my clients, when we are working on a transformation for them, the majority of them are just strength training 3 times a week. And when we go into a fat loss phase, that does not change. We keep our training structure exactly the same because that amount of training, 3 to 4 times a week at the most for your weight training, is going to give you enough of the stimulus as well as long as you're doing a properly structured program to make sure you're training your main muscle groups multiple times a week and give you time for recovery in between, which is such an important part of the puzzle. And just doing more cardio is a recipe for burnout unless it is, again, something that is structured well to be able to complement your weight training and to work hand in hand with the amount of calories that you're doing, again, to be able to stay the course. Because if you just focus on being like, I'm going to exercise every single day, then even if it doesn't catch up with you in a month, it is very likely that in 2 months, you might end up falling off the wagon and then spiraling the other way. I speak from very much experience on this because I have made so many mistakes on this in myself in the past. I have done 8-week challenges galore, and one particular one, one of the rules that we had to follow was that we just had to exercise every single day. Some of it was in this outdoor boot camp that I was a part of, but the rest of it was just doing anything that like burnt calories and, got your heart rate up across the 7 days. And once that 8 weeks was over, all I wanted to do was nothing. And so the diet was really restrictive. The diet was really, really extreme. And then the exercise was also really extreme. And at the end of the 8 weeks, I fell completely off the wagon and I ended up regaining all of the weight that I had lost and feeling so terrible by the end of it. And not only that, I look back and those 8 weeks were so miserable and so hard. And so I didn't even enjoy the process. And so instead, if we focus on doing things strategically, for most of my clients, when they transition from maintenance and they go into a fat loss phase, they still keep doing their 3 weight sessions a week. And then they might add in a little bit of cardio. Some people go through a whole fat loss phase without having to add in any cardio, and they just focus on walking and they focus on doing 3 weight sessions. Some people need to add in a little bit more cardio. Again, it depends on so many factors, such as your routine, such as what's required for you to actually make sure that you're in a deficit, as well as your preference of whether you prefer to add in more steps or cardio to continue to drive progress. But the majority can get through an entire fat loss phase by maybe just adding 3 cardio sessions as total by the end of their fat loss phase. So they might start with 1 or 2 and maybe they just build them up from 20 minutes to 30 minutes. It really doesn't need to be a lot, but it needs to be based on where you are, where you're starting from, the results that you want, and the progress that your body needs. Just adding more because you think it's going to be better is not going to be the best strategy for, again, staying in the game long enough to be able to get the results. And this is where we need to realize the difference between what training does and what exercise is. Because when we're focused on a transformation, we want our workouts to mainly be focused on training to change our body shape, and that comes from our weight training. And then we use cardio as a lever to continue to push results when we need to. But the majority of my clients, they don't do high intensity cardio. They do steady state cardio. So just going on the treadmill out an incline, or on the cross trainer or a rower or a bike, just at a steady state, zone 2, really kind of not raising the heart rate too much. And in doing so, it also helps manage fatigue, which again is going to allow you to make sure that you can stick with these things long enough to be able to produce the result and to be able to then transition from that into maintenance after. Then the third thing that I see people doing that tends to lead to burnout very quickly, or not sticking with the goals in the first place, is relying on motivation instead of having systems and standards. Motivation comes and goes. If you think you are going to transform your body based on motivation alone, you are going to be sorely mistaken. I don't know anyone who is motivated all the time, because motivation is a feeling. It does come and it goes. I'm not motivated all the time to go to the gym. I don't go to the gym because of motivation. I go because of the standards that I hold for myself. And I go because I have literally trained myself to go even when I don't feel like it, because I, first of all, have a plan that is something that is realistic for me and that is relevant to my goals. So it's got, everything's thought through. It's not just like, just go and do more. And so then I have also just practiced the habit of continuing to show up for myself and not go back on my word. And so January motivation is super high. I don't know about you, but when the gym that I go to has been absolutely heaving at the time that I go. So I've been trying to push back my gym time a little bit later, because 6 o'clock in the morning is just like mega busy. And by 7, it kind of tails off a little bit. But because we can see the number of people that are in the gym on the app that we have for the login for the gym, I can see that there's literally about double the people in the gym than there was in December, because motivation is super high. And I know that in a couple of weeks, it's going to start dropping off, because so many people let their feelings dictate whether they are going to actually show up for their goals. And this is the thing, is that I talk to my clients all the time about motivation. And so many of them are like, oh, I didn't feel motivated to do that this week. And I'm like, okay, let's do it anyway, because we need to start becoming the person that acts out of standards. And I don't like thinking about feeling like I have to do something, or, I've got to have willpower. It's not about deciding to act from that space either. Instead, I always talk to my clients about having standards for yourself, because a standard is something that you can therefore rise to. It's something that you know that the best version of you and the results that you really want to get, and the highest version of you, that is someone that you look to the future and you think of, who you want to be in a year's time. Think about the standards that they hold for themselves, and then you want to start acting from those standards now. And I just find standards such a really inspiring way to look at how to achieve your goals. But then the trick is making sure that we're not holding perfectionist standards, that we have standards that we rise to, that we want to focus on being the best version of ourselves, that challenge us, that get us to really kind of like push ourselves. But crucially, we also don't need to beat ourselves over the head with them and think that, if we don't stick to things perfectly, then we are, failing as human beings or anything like that. But we just want to separate our actions from motivation. And this is where it's so important to focus on having a goal and to make sure that the actions that you have set are in alignment with that goal. Like I said, going back to those first couple of points, so many people just are like, oh, I just want to lose weight. I just want it to be gone now. 1,200 calories, that will get me to my diet, to my goal faster. That will, cutting out this food group, that's just going to make everything go quicker. And then not only is that, very hard to stick to because we live in the real world where we have a variety of different foods to eat, where we have temptations and things like that. But not only that, we end up then not really knowing when it's going to end because we haven't set a clear timeline. And fat loss is meant to be a phase. It is not a lifestyle. And so if you have a fat loss goal as part of your January plan, then that's absolutely no problem. But just remember, your goal is not to still be in that fat loss phase by December. And so if you have a clear end date, then you can make sure that you tailor the actions that you need for that time, have an exit strategy out of it to get back to maintenance, where you have more flexibility back into your plan. And then you also know that the standards for your fat loss phase need to be at a certain level. And then you can start to also shift your standards to something that's more maintenance, in alignment with maintenance after. And that doesn't mean that we then drop our standards once we get out of fat loss. It's just the level of balance in each of those phases is slightly different. And so we also want to think about having habits that we stick to instead of, again, relying on motivation. All of my clients get a progress tracker so that they are able to keep track of the things that they are committing to every single week. And so we have 4 key metrics that we monitor every single day: the total calories, the amount of protein that we're eating, how many steps we're doing, and whether we've done a strength workout. But not every day is a strength workout day because we only do 3 sessions a week for most of my clients. And so they monitor those each week and they can see if they are holding themselves to the standards that they have set. Their calorie goal and protein goal is individual to them, and their steps goal. And so then they have these standards that are very attainable to stay consistent with. And then we also have things like making sure we're getting enough fiber, getting enough water, sleeping well. The simple things make the biggest difference, rather than just thinking, I'm just going to white knuckle it through this to get to my goal, and then I can't wait to go and eat and drink whatever I want to again. That is just going to set you up for failure from the get-go. Then the fourth thing that I see that trips so many people up with their physique transformations is just always chasing the scale, instead of learning how to actually assess so many different forms of progress. Because if you are only looking at the scale, and if you are only happy when it goes down, and if you aren't even doing jumping on the scale at enough times to be able to actually get a sense of the trends. So maybe, for example, you only weigh yourself once a week. That doesn't actually give you any data to work with. It just tells you what you weighed on one particular day. And something that I do with all of my clients is we do daily weighing, jumping on the scale first thing in the morning, after going to the bathroom, before eating or drinking, absolutely anything. And we do that every single day. And then we look at the averages across the week. And this is such an eye-opening experience for anyone who's not done it before. And it is actually the best way of working through any funkiness with the scale that you might have, because in doing so, we actually learn our body's fluctuations. And all of those fluctuations, the majority of time, are down to water retention, because we hold on to water for so many different reasons. I'm going to do an episode on the scale in the next few weeks, I think. So I'll save more of it for that. But if we're just focusing on the scale and we're not even assessing the scale in a very accurate way, it is very easy to get demoralized or think that things aren't working as fast as we should. And instead, especially if fat loss is a goal, which, let's be real, most people's goal in January and tends to be fixed around fat loss. So if we end up letting the scale dictate our mood and we don't know how to read it properly, and we're not looking at things like measurements and progress photos alongside it, it's so easy to get discouraged and then just think, oh, this isn't working. And it's at that point, and the actions that we take at the time that we might think that it's not working, that is the actual thing that ends up causing our progress to stall. It's because so many times I see people's scale weight staying static for quite a long time and then suddenly doing a drop because water is released, and it's actually showing then the fat loss that has been happening all along underneath the surface. But if we make reactive decisions based on what that scale is saying, then we don't allow ourselves to stay in the game long enough to actually look at those trends. And if you are going on a proper body transformation journey, so you are weight training effectively, you might also be building some muscle. If you haven't gone in a ridiculous 1200 calorie deficit, you might also be optimizing for building some muscle at the same time as reducing fat. So you might then see your measurements go down and see changes in your progress photos, even if the scale doesn't change too much. And so we want to learn how to look at all of those data points together to be able to assess progress properly, so that then again we can stay in the game long enough to actually understand what is a good rate of progress and am I making it? And if not, what tweaks do I need to make to be able to adjust that? And there are always 3 levers that we can pull in order to be able to continue to make progress. Actually 4, I will say, because the first one is always checking our accuracy with how on point we are with hitting our targets. That is the first thing to check always. Then we can also make a slight calorie reduction if we need, or we can increase steps, or we can add in a little bit more cardio. But what so many people do is that, oh, it's not working, I must just need to do more of everything and then cut my calories even further. And that is what leads to burnout. So we need a proper way of managing our progress so that we don't sabotage things when they are working so well. This is what so much of my coaching is often around when people are going through a strategic fat loss phase for the first time, is helping them read the data and assessing the progress that they're making so that they can stay the course. Because it's so easy for me to spot when that progress is happening. And it will be easy for you to spot as well when you start to learn how to read the data. So don't obsess about the scale, but learn how to read it properly. And then this last point about why so many people's goals fizzle out by the time it gets to February is that they don't plan for February, they just plan for January. And so for so many people in January, especially if you are in a country like I am at the minute in the UK where it is winter, a lot of people hibernate in January. So many people, go, oh, okay, I'm going to do a dry January, or I'm going to just not go out and not have a social life for January. I've barely seen any of my friends actually this January because I've been so busy working. But there's also on our social group, it's been a lot quieter than it has in previous months, and things are starting to kind of get booked back up again for February. And so for so many people, once they come out of January, maybe their hibernation month, and they've had that month of a little bit of chill time post-Christmas, and then the social things start to come in, and that's when all those temptations come back. If you are someone who has gone too extreme with your diet, if you have sworn off all of these things, then when you get surrounded by the temptations that come with just living a normal life and you don't know how to work around it because you've not made a plan for it, that's when it's very easy for the wheels to come off. And so some strategies that I always work with my clients to how to work around those things, because yes, if your goal is fat loss, you do need to be more restrained than at other times of the year when you are in a maintenance phase or a building phase, for example. But you don't need to be a saint. You don't need to swear off alcohol unless that's something you actually want to do. You don't need to never eat out. You just need to be more mindful of how often you're doing those things. And so for all of my clients, they have a weekly calorie budget so that therefore they can have a little bit less during the week and then save a little bit more of their calorie budget for the weekend to include a couple of meals out. They make different choices when they are at those meals out in alignment with their goals in fat loss, but they're not trying to never go out or do anything like that. Some of my clients love including a piece of chocolate every single day because it helps them stay consistent. Others would rather go and enjoy something more indulgent at the weekend. But again, it's their calorie budget. They can spend it how they want, as long as they therefore hit their target overall by the end of the week. And if you are going at a 20 or 30% to 30% deficit, then you should be able to still include things and make progress along the way because you're not going to extremes. And if we focus on our standards, if we focus on taking action even when we're not motivated, but crucially, if we have a plan that actually isn't too extreme and that we can actually stick to, then you will be able to stay the course long enough and navigate social situations because your plan is based on principles, not on rigid rules. Then you'll be able to navigate busy weeks, social weeks. You'll be able to build in a diet break if you are going on a holiday and you just need to have a week at maintenance in the middle of your fat loss phase. You'll be able to handle lower energy days. You'll be able to handle life stress as it comes up and everything not fall off the rails. So just to recap, the 5 things that I see so many people fall into the trap of that then means that their goals fizzle out by the time it comes to February is that they start with urgency instead of starting with a plan that actually feels more moderate but can go the distance. So no food rules, 1200 calorie diets, any of those things. They also tend to confuse just doing more with doing what actually works, and just think throwing more workouts at it and things like that is actually going to help them hit their goals. Number 3 is that they rely on motivation instead of systems and standards. Number 4, they chase the scale instead of having an actual goal and learning how to measure progress properly. And number 5 is they don't plan for February. They only focus on January and white knuckling it through. So have a think about which of those feels like something that would help you the most if you decided to work on that, so that you can then make 2026 a year that you can actually transform rather than just staying stuck in a yo-yo cycle. And of course, if you want help with that, then that is exactly the kind of thing that I help all of my clients with, so that they can therefore continue to make progress on their goals year after year, remembering that progress is not just about a fat loss phase. It is about going through a full transformation cycle, having periods of fat loss, then periods of maintenance, periods of building muscle, all tailored to you and your goals. And if you actually approach things like that, transforming your body can be really fun. You can still have a life. You can make great progress, and you'll be focusing on the things that actually matter and therefore won't burn out. So if that is something that you want to explore, make sure you hit the link in the show notes below for details of how to apply for coaching. Otherwise, have a think about which of those 5 is the most important for you to focus on, and let me know on Instagram as well at Kathy Morton Fitness. I would love to hear.